Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, for attending the Screen Gab presentation of Apple TV Plus's series Government Cheese. I'm Maira Garcia, the television editor for the Los Angeles Times, and I'm so happy to be here with you this evening. Thank you for being here. So I would like you to join me in welcoming our esteemed guest, Paul Hunter, the co-creator, writer, and executive producer of the series, and David Oyelowo, the star and executive producer. Please welcome them to the stage. Hi. Hi, guys. Thank you for being here.
Hello, hello.
So let's start with some basics. Paul, you have a very long history of directing some of pop music's most notable music videos, from Keith Sweat to Aaliyah to Lenny Kravitz to J-Lo. You've done award-winning commercial work as well, like the Nike Freestyle commercial. You guys will remember the beats. Just Google it when you get home. When you hear it, you'll know it. But this is your first foray into TV. Why did you want to do the show?
Why did I want to do the show? I wanted to, express something personal. Like you said, I'd worked in advertising and music for a while, and I was excited to sort of, go down this road of telling a story about my family and my dad, who's on, the Hampton character, and just exploring. His walk into coming back into our family and, trying to, get back in our family. And so it was just a real sort of personal story that I wanted to tell.
And the story evolved a lot, too, before we got to what we see now. Is that right? It started out as a film idea.
Yeah, well, it started as a feature that I'd been writing for a while. And then I met David here, and I had a short film. I said, you know what, I need to, create a short sort of express the idea of the feature. Mm-hmm. And reached out to David and gave him the script, and I think he could probably tell the story better than I could.
So yeah, David, you obviously have a long list of accolades, impressive list of credits in film, TV, the stage. What was it about this production that made you compelled to become a part of it?
Well, as Paul says, it was a short film script that he wrote that he presented me with. But to be perfectly honest, it was Paul as well, just as a person, as a creative, his passion for the story. But also in talking to him, I could tell I was talking to someone with a very unique perspective on what film is and what it should look like, and especially as it pertains to centering Black people in ways that we hadn't seen, or certainly rarely see, on screen. We talked about filmmakers like Spike Jonze and the Coen brothers and Wes Anderson and Paul Thomas Anderson, filmmakers that we love, but whose work is very much something that we get to observe, but not necessarily get to inhabit in terms of those tones, in terms of things that are fantastical in that way. And then the fact that, he, for whatever reason, saw something in me that was tantamount to his dad, which I haven't asked you yet. Like, that's kind of weird, Paul. So. Anyway, we'll unpack that after this. But I remember he sent me the script after we had this meeting, and I opened it on my phone. And those of you here who may be actors, you're curious, right? When you get a script, and I just opened it. I thought, let me just read the first few pages, see what this thing is. And I literally, where I stood is where I remained from page to page, or from the beginning to the end. And that was because I just hadn't read anything like this before. It was so quirky, so weird, so fantastical, so surreal, but so relatable, so cinematic, so ambitious, all at the same time. And I just thought, well, look, if it's a short film, let's go for it. We shot it over 4 days, the beginning of 2019, and I thought at the very least it'll sort of be a nice kind of experiment to spread my wings doing something I haven't done before. But then it came out great and became a kind of proof of concept that ended up being what we used to buy Apple idea into the idea of doing the show.
Before we get deeper into the show itself, I feel like the setting itself is like a character as well. You guys shot this in the Valley. It's set in Chatsworth, which, like, shooting in LA is sadly a rarity nowadays. Was it important to you guys that it be shot here?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is the story of Harrison, the character who's into the Chumash culture, and also Hampton, who is selling an invention in the to Rocket Corp, which is, there's plenty of aerospace companies in the San Fernando Valley, and then the Chumash actually in their territory, they're in the Borough Flats where the rocket testing was being done, and so it was important to establish, the valley, to establish that world. And, with the rocks out in Chatsworth. And I always said, this is our Twin Peaks. This, we'll continue we needed something visually to anchor the world that we're going to be in. And we're going to, the story was going to be, really sort of whimsical, and there'd be, some, really, really, interesting sort of moments in the stories. And so we always wanted to make sure that we had a visual that would really ground it. And also in the Valley, there was a certain kind of color tones that we were going for. And that was important in terms of the tone, and important in terms of the humor, and just the way that we plan to shoot it, which is when you look at the series as a whole, you'll be able to see that it's framed up really wide. There's beautiful tableaus in this, and it really, really helped with the tone and the storytelling.
Well, I had just spent 6 months in Texas doing a show called Bass Reeves. And I basically said, I'm not doing it unless we shoot it in the Valley, because that's where I live. So Paul and I live in the Valley. I will never forget when the Apple exec called me up and said, so New Mexico, really great tax break. Yeah. And I said, my wife is right here. Do you want to speak to her? Because that's not happening. But thankfully, they went the road with us. And as you say, in all honesty, there's so few things shoot in LA. So many of us live here and are part of this wonderful industry. And, I knew I had just enough juice that I was going to test how much money Apple actually have. And turns out it's a fair bit. So we ended up shooting it in the Valley, and not a day went by when a crew member didn't come up to us and just thank us so much for that fact. So we're very, very, very proud that we got to shoot it in the Valley and in LA.
I'm from Texas and I love Texas, but I get it. There's no place like home. So let's talk a moment about the characters. Paul, something you told one of our writers, Chris Wagner, who wrote about the series at the start, was that the characters are like the Addams family. They're these people in their own world.
Back to him asking me to play his dad, by the way. I just want you just collect this data as we go along. Okay, please carry on.
But that you wanted to express the feeling of being different compared to what people thought the way we should be, especially as Black people. Mm-hmm. I think this is really important, and I feel like I relate to it on two levels. One, as a person of color who felt really different growing up, and two, as an observer of pop culture. We often see stereotypes on screen, and breaking the mold can just feel so refreshing. Plus, there's just too few shows with nearly all Black cast. Was it important to you guys to see people who break the mold?
Yeah, 100%. You know, just from, like I said, this was a story that was a personal story that I wanted to tell, but it was something that I was really feeling. And you know, as a kid, I was always sort of teased, like, "Oh man, you're kind of off," or we don't really understand you. And you know, and I just wanted to sort of, you know, capture the, you know, who we were as a family, and you know how, you know, normal we were, at least to us. And
Yeah.
and it was just also important, like just in my journey, and you know, I've always wanted to express myself and not sort of be limited to you know, what people, you know, would want me to film or make, or a job that I may be going for. And you know, in anything, I just wanted to be able to have the same you know, opportunity as anyone else. And so it was important to tell this story the way, you know, I wanted to tell this story. And you know, I resisted, you know, coming back and, you know, making things until I could able to, you know, be able to do, you know, this story the way I wanted to. And thanks for signing up to be my dad.
You're welcome.
Are either of the boys an expression of you, or are they both like a little bit of you?
Yeah, so the Harrison character, who's into the Native American culture, I had a neighbor who was Apache, and when my dad was gone, when he was incarcerated, you know, he used to watch out for my brother and I, and so, you know, I'd go by his house, and his name was Rudy. And Rudy and his wife would, you know, make us lunch, and you know, he would take us in the backyard, in his backyard, and in the back of in the back rooms, and show me all this, you know, all these eagle feathers. And I was like, wow, dude, I want one of those.
Yeah.
And he would say, you know, you got to work your way up to this. And so I just really grew close to him and loved the culture. So you know, Harrison is a part of me, and my brother, who, you know, is just talented without trying in many things. And so that was our Einstein character.
Yeah. We'll come back to the characters in a second here, but let's talk a little bit about the themes. Religion's a big theme in this series. In the opening episode, we see Hampton reading the book of Jonah, which is in the Old Testament, and it's referred to throughout the series, whether it's Hampton fishing, being swallowed by a fish, or discussion with the rabbi about Jonah. He also refers to God as Yahweh. But then you have Harrison, who talks about the solstice and trying to get the eagle feather, which you just mentioned here. We also see the Chumash people having a ceremony in this final episode. Why these religious themes, both old and older?
Well, you know, I grew up in the Pentecostal church, and you know, for me, it was about faith, and not necessarily any, you know, particular religion, but I think everything sort of boils down to faith. And I really wanted to express how I felt growing up. And you know, my dad being incarcerated, I thought, you know what, when he came out of prison, he, you know, he really had something. He was different. He had something to say. He was encouraging us. And I thought about, like, prison it was like the belly. And so I said, you know what, he must be Jonah. And then from there, Jonah was, you know, in sort of at the core, God wanted Jonah just to sort of believe and go to Nineveh and talk to the people. But Jonah was always struggling as far as which way should he go and what should he do. And so Hampton, coming out of prison with all of this sort of the challenges that he has, and you know, he has this drill that he's trying to sell, and he's got the pressure of these guys trying to get, you know, take his drill, and he owes money. And really at the core, you know, you know, God just wanted him to believe and have faith in him, no matter what he was throwing towards Hampton. And so that's where it came from. And I just wanted to express something visually. I really wanted to tell the story in a unique way, where instead of sort of talking about it so much, that we would show it in an interesting way. And so I thought, you know, let's have the fish come. Let's get into other elements that we can visually play with.
And animals play a pretty symbolic role too, whether it's frogs, eagles, owls, how much does that relate to that theme of religion? And David, what was it like to have an owl almost fly in your face?
Yeah, that owl was real.
I wondered.
It was massive. No, animals were definitely a theme on this, not least my least favorite animal, snakes. You don't see any snakes in the show, but the was it episode 5? Episode 5. So we shot at Lake Piru, and the tall grasses next to the lake were snake infested. To the point whereby I remember going for a take, and our camera woman jumped out of her skin and went snake, snake, snake. And we had there were so many snakes. We had 3 snake wranglers on set with us. And literally, this guy comes along with the contraption, picks up the snake, and then before you go, okay, and roll sound. And I was like, what are we doing? So yeah, that was. I mean, I think we caught like 2 or 3 snakes a day there. It was really. Ooh, that showed me how much I love what I do, because I did not know why I stuck around. But yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that really drew me to it as well. You know, I'm a Christian myself, and so I really related to this idea through Hampton of a complicated relationship with God. I think anyone who has a faith practice that is true and real and honest, the fact of the matter is there is no faith without doubt. I think that's what makes faith such a potent thing. And so the fact that he is trying to stick to this righteous path, but just cannot cede control to his own life, I think whether you have a religious practice or not, that's something we can all relate to. And as Paul said, that fact that you get to see that journey, which I think is pretty relatable and universal, play out in this incredibly visual, visceral way, tied to a man who is equal parts selfish and selfless all at the same time. I just found him an incredibly human character. And then you have this spiritual component, which I also found relatable. So yeah, it spoke to me, and I thought as a result it would inevitably speak to the audience.
Yeah. So this leads me back to the characters. Harrison in particular, I really feel like he's one of the most heartbreaking of the group. It's obvious he craves a father figure, and Hampton, as much as he wants to, can't do it, or not very well anyway. Harrison looks to Rudy for that, but he's gone, as we find out. Einstein, on the other hand, is a bit more aloof about it. He's like, if you're going to be sneaky, just tell me beforehand. How should we feel about Hampton? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy?
At his core, Hampton is a good guy. He's just struggling, and he wants to do the right thing. He wants to be a dad. He wants to be a husband. He wants to be a family man, and he has all of these challenges. He wants to be a businessman, and and I think about this. The Prevost characters, when they show up, not only do they want to, they want to take his. Not only do they want to take his drill, they want to own it. They want to own everything about it, and that's really taking Hampton's soul. It's taking everything that his inspiration, and that's really just, for me, thinking about that, that's a really incredible challenge for someone who's just going to basically take everything away from you, and it has nothing to do with money, but just about who you are as a man, and as a what you stand for. And so at his core, he's complicated, but he's a complicated character.
David, I feel like you thrive as an actor playing imperfect people. So what was it like playing this very flawed character?
Well, I think as an actor, the most interesting people to play are imperfect people, because I think that is the definition of a human being. I don't know any perfect human beings. Paul's pretty cool, but that's the interesting part. And I think the reason why actors gravitate towards that is because audiences feel able to see themselves in those characters, because like I say, that's what it is to be human. What I really enjoyed about playing Hampton is there is this overriding glow of joy about him.
Yeah.
He sort of runs at life in a way that I just found so refreshing, especially considering it was the 60s in America, a time that was incredibly challenging for Black people in this country. And the fact that despite having been in prison, despite having major marital issues, despite, his kids quite rightly and understandably being circumspect about him, despite having the Prevost brothers wanting to kill him, he somehow is able to run at life in a way that you go, man, that's a way to go into your day, and I think it's this faith component. He was able to see beyond his circumstances while being stuck in them, in a sense, also, I was just having so much fun playing the guy. I mean, I've played some fairly intense characters, especially in this era, in the 60s. So to be wearing those suits, to be seeing those cars, to be in that milieu, but without the burden of all of that in the character was also something I probably had more fun than I should have done. But it was a great pleasure nonetheless.
Yeah, I think that confidence shines through. He's a very smooth talker. He's kind of a fake it till you make it kind of guy. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, down from his walk to his, everything about it. I mean, I literally... Paul would always play music just before we went for a take. And so there was a kind of music and a rhythm to the family, to Hampton, to the set. He did a phenomenal job. He really set the tone for the fact that it was going to be a show and a world that had buoyancy to it. And so, we kind of ran with that. And from the very first moment Paul talked to me about his dad, I was sort of fascinated by the fact that his dad was in and out of prison. Clearly, that must have been a complicated relationship to have between father and son, let alone between your mom and your dad as well. I met Paul's mum early on as well. We actually shot the short film we did together in his mum's house, and she's a wonderful human being. And yet, whenever Paul would talk about his dad, it was sort of with this sense of awe and admiration, and he would always laugh when he would tell the anecdotes about his dad. There was never any heaviness, which I'm sure there is in some ways, but whenever he was talking to me about him, there was this light in the midst of it all. And so, because I have the guy next to me who essentially we are seeing how he viewed his life growing up in the Valley in the 60s and 70s, that gave me a lot of confidence to tell the truth of that joy, because I saw it emanating out of Paul, so to speak. I think that I would have definitely made the choice to go darker, in a sense, given the themes, but I think that's what makes the show feel pretty unique. Yeah,
I agree. So in contrast to Hampton, you have someone like Astoria, who's played by Simone Missick, and I feel like she spoke to me. One of my favorite episodes is episode 7, when her neighbor Martha comes to visit her, and it's a bit of a fever dream, but it's a way of getting inside her mind. how she doesn't feel good enough to apply for the design job where she works, how Hampton was all-consuming to her, and how she used his time away to find herself. Imposter syndrome, I would say, is another theme here, and I think it's something that especially people of color deal with. Both of you guys are very successful, but was imposter syndrome something you ever dealt with in your careers?
Paul evidently doesn't suffer with this, which is why I'm answering the question. Of course, I mean, that's an occupational hazard as an actor.
Yeah.
We all know the cliche. Every job you do, you think, okay, that may be the last one, never going to work again. But it's such a vulnerable thing, being an actor, playing these characters, because our job is to hold a mirror up to humanity, and humanity is so complicated.
Yeah.
And you are expressing that platforming of humanity to humanity, and the reality is that humanity lets you know if you did it well or not, and that's just very very vulnerable, especially when it's an art form that is so subjective. So, one of the things you have to make peace with as an actor is that you're never going to please everyone, but the ideal case scenario is you please many. And so, yeah, that sticks with you. But I think that's a good thing. I think it being something that keeps you up at night in terms of whether you're going to be able to achieve it or not is why you put in the work. Is
Yeah, it
why
helps you grow too.
Yeah. So yes, of course, I deal with imposter syndrome, but you overcome it with preparation. You overcome it with doing the work and then hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could add to that is, what David is saying about the preparation. And I remember the first time, getting hired to be a director and walking on set, and all this crew there and all these cameras and equipment, and feeling like am I good enough to do this? How did I talk my way into making this, shooting something? And again, it just comes back, and really for me, it comes back to the theme of the show, which is faith, which is believing in yourself, and being ready for that opportunity. And one thing, just speaking to the Jonah part of the story, was Hampton as Jonah, is that his mission really was to come to the family and inspire them.
Yeah.
So he's the rock that comes in and really sort of, you throw it in the pond and you see this ripple effect. And, Astoria, is many, the many issues that she has with him, she's actually seeing Hampton coming out of prison with an idea for an invention and getting out there and going for it. And I think inside, she's sort of now has a chance to reflect, and that's actually inspiring for her. So Hampton, in a sense, doesn't even realize that he's fulfilling his calling and inspiring his family, which is a lot, is what my dad was saying to me when he got out. He encouraged me to say, hey, dude, go for your dreams. Don't go down the path that I was going, that I went down. And that's really what it's all about.
So my last question for you guys, how does music play into this whole series? You got Pharrell to do the theme song. We hear both newer and older music alike, and it finishes with Santana's Jingo. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. As David was saying, we played music on the set, and part of it from the music was just to really sort of, get everyone to, just think of this as, let's have fun with this, and let's get a rhythm and a vibe going. And that was, part of, coming up in music videos, it just, that was sort of the sort of my process.
Yeah, sure.
And also just with music, I wanted to play music that you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear, in the show with, with the Black family. My mom, she played a lot of Elton John and Steely Dan, and when we were younger, and my dad, he played a lot of Earth, Wind and Fire. So it was a combination of, my dad playing, some rock and roll and some Earth, Wind and Fire, my mom playing some rock and roll, and we kind of I wanted it to sort of blend together, and that was sort of the tone of it. And Pharrell was perfect. I mean, when I talked to Pharrell, about how he grew up, he had the same experience, and that's, the style of his music, it's just kind of modern day Curtis Mayfield, but it's a really fresh tone to it. So,
sorry, one more thing. Promise. Will we see more of this world? My last question for real.
I think we have a lot inside of us.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. As we've said, we had a lot of fun doing it. I really would love to have the opportunity to bring a show that will shoot in Los Angeles again. We definitely want that. We need more of that. The reaction from the audience has been great. The thing that I've had time and again has been I haven't seen anything quite like it before, and that is an incredible thing to say when you think of the sheer amount of stuff on now, let alone through the years. To be putting something truly unique out into the world for a global audience is something we're deeply proud of, and we will definitely take the opportunity to do more of that.
Great. Guys, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
If everybody could just remain seated for a bit. David and Paul, thank you again. True pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.